A great technological revolution is brewing in the UK during the heart of the Victorian era. Ada Lovelace, who has an inquiring mind and who is a programming pioneer, has called upon you to help develop the first prototype of the analytical machine. Ada will help provide you with all of the programs and blueprints that you might need, and you will be collecting all of these pieces, going through, interacting with the people in this world in the hopes of creating the most efficient analytical machine. Welcome to the channel today. My name is Carly, and today we're going to be doing a Kickstarter preview for Ada's Dream from Alley Cat Games. Ada's Dream is going to be the newest title from Alley Cat Games, and there is a current crowdfunding campaign going on for this game over on Kickstarter, so I'll make sure to link everything in the description below, so if you are interested in checking out this game, make sure to head over to that page. Having said all of that, this is a Kickstarter preview for this game, so what I'm going to be doing is going in kind of to a general overview of how this game operates and plays, and then I'll be jumping over into basically who I feel like this game would be good for. I also want to give a huge shout out to Alley Cat Games for helping sponsor this video today. I already kind of touched upon the theme in the video, was able to kind of help lay the groundwork for lots of the technologies that we are able to benefit from today. So in this game, you are taking on the role of an assistant for Ada, helping work on this analytics machine. You'll be helping her in her study as she is trying to find programmings. You will be attending meetings with her, meeting with other great minds at the time. You will be attending institutions, kind of taking classes and learning a lot. You will also be traveling throughout the UK, visiting the universities, teaching lectures, and gaining a little bit of resources for doing that. Again, all in the hopes of creating the most efficient analytics machine. Now, before I jump into this, I do want to kind of quickly mention a couple things. First is that the rules and the board and everything that you see is a prototype. I was very much working with prototype rules and a prototype board, so everything is subject to change. So again, I want to reference you to the Kickstarter campaign to kind of see the more finalized workings and renderings of what they are planning for this, and also kind of more finalized rules. Another thing I did want to briefly mention is that this is a heavier weight game. So having said that, when I go into my overview, I am just very generally going to explain kind of how a round works, how a turn works, what you're going to be doing, but I won't go into too much detail because this is not official how to play. So again, let's go ahead and jump into an overview of how this game plays. Again, overview, but then we'll go ahead and jump into who I feel like this game would be good for. So on a player's turn, there's two things that you can choose to do. You can choose to either do a workshop action, or you can choose to do a dice action. The workshop action has to do with this center wheel that's here in the middle of the board. The point of a workshop action is to collect dice that you will then add to your storage area on your personal player board. The way you'll go about doing this is you will select a die, and then you will move it into the next clockwise space. After moving that dice in, that dice actually then bumps out a dice of the same or lower value of the dice that you moved into that spot. So again, you'll move a dice in and then bump a dice out. The dice that you bumped out will then activate a certain ability. There are lots of little kind of minor one-time abilities kind of on the inner circle of this board. So for example, if I did this, then I would actually collect 2 coal for bumping out this dice on this particular location. So now that I collected this blue dice, I will go ahead and store it on my personal storage area on my personal player mat. Now these dice that you're going to be collecting are incredibly important. Not only the number that's on the dice, but also the color. Now we're going to be talking about what the color does later on in the video, but for right now, let's go ahead and talk about the number. So the dice that I bumped out was a 3 dice. Again, now it's in my storage area on my board. Now, after I've completed that, now I can actually do an optional turn, and that optional turn is playing a card from your hand. Throughout the game, you will be holding cards in your hand, but you can actually only play those cards on certain times during the game, and that time is when you are collecting a dice that has the same number that matches the number on the card. So for example, this is a 3 dice, so now because of my optional turn, I can choose to now play a card, but again, it has to match the value of the dice that I just collected. All of the cards in the game represent important figures during that time, and they allow you to either gain resources or have special abilities that again really benefit you throughout this game. After deciding if you want to play a partner card, again with a matching number, then you actually have one more optional action that you can do as well. Now we'll talk about how you gain assignment cards a little bit later on, but when you do have assignment cards in under your personal player board, after you go collect a dice, you will check the matching color of assignments, and however many cards you have in that particular color, then you can gain research, which is the research tracks are these tracks along the outside of the board. So you'll be able to move up a certain number of research tracks. Again, we'll kind of go into that a little bit more later, but that is the optional thing that you can do, is basically doing research. So that is essentially what a workshop action looks like, is taking a dice, moving it, bumping out a dice, and then adding that dice to your storage system. Again, you can optionally play a card from your hand or do an assignment. The next thing that you can choose to do is an actual dice action. When you choose this action, this is what allows you to take the dice from your storage, adding it to your analytical machine. Now, I mentioned before that the color of the dice is really important, just as important as the number, and this is why. Once you add a dice to your analytical machine, the color of that dice then represents what action you are able to activate now after placing that dice. So coming back to the blue dice here, because I placed this blue dice, that means that the action now that I'm able to do is this travel action of the board. Again, the reason why I'm able to do that is because I placed a blue dice, so I'm able to now do the blue action. Every single one of these actions are different, and let's kind of quickly go over what each section means. So because we placed a blue dice, let's go ahead and start with this travel action on the board. In the travel action, you are able to spend resources to move around this big old map here. And on this map represents certain universities that you'll be visiting at the time. Thematically, you're like giving lectures around the UK. Down here in Ada's study, this is where you'll primarily be helping Ada with her research. When you come down here, you are able to collect gear tiles, which are very important, which we'll talk about in a second. You can also get assignment cards and also programming cards. So let's kind of talk about the difference between an assignment card and a programming card. Assignment cards are tasks that Ada has asked you to fulfill or complete. When you gain an assignment card, you get the bonus at the bottom, and then I mentioned before that these assignment cards kind of get tucked under your board a little bit. Well, where you actually tuck them is denoted by the dice color that's shown up here in the corner of the card. So for example, if I were to collect this card, then after I gain the bonuses shown, I would actually tuck it under the blue section of my personal player board. So now going back in time to the workshop turn, when I do a workshop action, if I collect a blue dice, then because I have one blue card now stored under my board, I can actually advance up this research track one spot because I have one card now tucked. These programming tiles, though, are a little bit different, and these are actually one of my favorite parts of the game, are these programming cards. So taking a look at your personal player board, you have obviously spots that hold dice, you have spots that hold gears, but then you also have spots along the top and the side that hold these programming cards. All of the programs are different, and when you collect these, you're able to plug them in onto certain locations on your player board. And what they do is, if you're able to meet the requirements shown on each program card, then it would actually be worth, for example, this one would be worth 6 points at the end of the game. So let's go ahead and show a different one here. So this program card says in this row or this column, depending on where you place this program card, it says any color except red and yellow. So that means I can place any color in this particular row, but I cannot have red or yellow. And if I do that, then it'll be worth my programming analytic machine. That row will be worth an additional 6 points for me at the end of the game. So that's what these program cards are. You're able to kind of plug them into certain locations on your analytics machine, basically hoping to get end game points. Ada's Study is also where you can acquire her notes throughout the game, these cute little books, and we'll kind of go into these a little bit later, but these can kind of help you unlock more abilities on your turns. This yellow section of the board is where you'll be attending meetings, and you'll be able to get more cards into your hands, basically kind of talking and chatting with the great minds at the time. This green area of the board is the institutions area, and basically all that happens here thematically, you are like attending lectures, But what you'll be doing is you'll be claiming certain locations here and then gaining the resources that are shown. Now these 4 main actions that are here on the board, everything that I just described is basically the basic action that you can do when you go to that particular location, but I've mentioned before these kind of tracks on the outside of the board. When you visit a location that you're fairly high on that particular color of track on, it actually unlocks more abilities for you to do when you activate that area. So if I were to go to Ada's study, and let's pretend that my little magnifying glass here was fairly high up on this little research track. Again, how you get high on the research track is by activating assignments, right? Every time you're tucking, you tuck those cards and then you get a dice of that color, then that's when you can advance along this research track. So if I was fairly high on this research track and I went to do an Ada study turn, then instead of just being able to do one of these actions here, I actually could do up to two of these actions. So the higher you are on the research tracks for the particular colors, they basically just unlock more abilities and more things that you can do on your turn. Again, I know there's kind of a lot going on, but those are the 2 main things that you can do on your turn. Either do a workshop action, which again allows you to collect dice, or you can choose to do a dice action, which allows you to take dice from your storage, placing it onto your analytical machine, and then again, based on the color of the dice you place, you're able to activate one of these 4 abilities. After you complete that main ability, you actually have another thing that you can choose to do. You can choose to either publish or you can choose to construct. I mentioned before that these cute little notes books are really important. Well, why they're important is because of that optional publish action that you can choose to do. Each of these sections of the board have a little secret publish ability that you can spend a book in order to activate. Arguably one of the most important things you can use these little books for is over here at the meetings action of the board. When you take a publish action here, you spend a book and you're able to gain one of these purple times gears, which are very, very important and can help score you a lot of points. Then the other bonus action that you can choose to do is constructing your gear tiles. Now, why these gears are important is because these gears, once you construct them, they help add up. They will help add up your dice to contribute to end game scoring. When you construct a gear, you will have to pay for the resources that are shown on the back. Once I pay for that, I then can place it onto any of the designated spots that are shown on my player board. But the tricky part is that while sometimes you can pay to place a gear, you actually need to clear off the spots or open up the spots before you actually place that gear. There are little discs that will be covering every little spot, so you need to be equally placing your discs at the same rate that you are gathering and able to pay for your little gear tiles. I already briefly mentioned this, but just to make sure I'm clear, at the end of the game you will go through and score up every single row and every single column of your dice with the completed gears. And as you go through and score up, all of those points will be worth end game points. On your personal player board, you also have something that is called Steam. And why Steam is important is you want to try to get your Steam up this track as high as you possibly can, because what your Steam is doing is it's actually capping the amount of points that you can get from your analytical machine. So let's pretend even if you had a really great scoring dice with, let's pretend you had 3 plus 5 times 6 or something. That would be worth a lot of points at the end of the game. But if your Steam, let's pretend your Steam is only up to this 20 marker here, that means it doesn't matter how many points that particular row will score you, it is capped at 20. So throughout the game, you'll be able to gain Steam. So you definitely want to try your best to gain as much Steam as you possibly can so you can get the maximum amount of points from your analytical machine. And so that is essentially what construction is. So again, kind of reeling this back, this is everything that you're going to be doing on your turn. Choosing between a main action and then possibly choosing between one of the bonus actions that you could choose to do. Play will just keep going round and round as everybody goes through and just keeps performing one of those actions that we previously talked about. Now, the end of the game is triggered when one player completely fills up their analytical machine, not necessarily from programs or from your gears, but from your dice. Whenever somebody places their last dice fully filling up all of the dice slots on their board, that is what automatically triggers the end of the game. The round continues until everybody has had the same amount of turns, and then you proceed to end game scoring. And the player who has the most points at the end of the game wins. Now I know that was kind of a lot. Like I said, this is kind of a heavier weight game. There is a lot going on, so hopefully that explanation kind of helped you and kind of made sense a little bit of this board and what essentially you're going to be doing. With the general overview out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into who I feel like this game would be good for. Obviously, there's a decent amount going on in this game. This is the type of game where you sit down and you have to plan out so far in advance so many of your moves. Really, essentially, everything comes down to this little rondel system here in the center of the board. Your dice that you collect is everything. Again, like I kind of mentioned, they're not only the color that you are collecting matters, but also the number. And again, the way that when you collect a dice, the number of that dice then indicates what cards you could potentially play at that time, which then could trigger off other abilities, which then when you place your dice, it because of the color, it associates with what action you can do on this main board. So you really, in order to play this game correctly, you really need to be planning out a lot of steps ahead. You need to be planning out those chain reactions. And there are also so many different paths to victory. There's lots of different ways to gain points in this game. I know the handful of times that I've played it, there's been times where I either completely ignored this section or completely ignored this section because that wasn't what I was trying to kind of go for on my, like, in that round and in that game. I was trying to focus really heavily on other aspects of the board. So it definitely leads to that replayability in regards to there's lots of different ways that you kind of dive into this game. If you like that level of thinkiness in games where you're just sitting planning out, trying to plan out not only your actions but also the particular pathways that you want to be taking, this is definitely one that I think you should look into. And having said all of that, I think the part about this game that surprised me the most was this personal analytics machine that you were working on. Because when I first read through the rule books and kind of saw this, I was like, I don't really think that'd be that much fun. But after playing it, I can tell you that this is actually my favorite part of the game, is building your own little machine. It was so fun not only to collect the dice that you need along with the gears, but also with these programs. These programs were so much fun. It almost had a little bit of a Sagrada feel to me in regards to you have certain requirements that you need to meet. And it was fun because as the game goes on, you don't start with any requirements. So you yourself get to build exactly what you want, and you get to literally, it feels like you're building your own machine. Because in Sagrada, you can't do that. In Sagrada, it tells you exactly, right from the beginning, you know exactly where certain things can go or where certain things can't go. But in this game, it's fun because you start with a blank slate. And so as the game goes on, you're able to really pick and choose, and almost like you feel like you're refining your machine, trying to get the most points out of this board. I think it honestly does a fantastic job of feeling like you're literally in there creating this machine, right? You're creating this analytics machine. And so to be the one that is doing it the most efficient or do it more efficient than your friends, it was so satisfying and so much fun. But then on top of this little puzzle that you're doing, you also have your steam, right? Because you don't want to overpower your engine. Even if you have this super amazing, if you've built this super amazing engine, if you don't have the steam enough to run it, it's going to cap out, right? It's going to burn out. And so I loved the thematics behind the steam and how you really need to increase that steam in order to increase the power of your machine. Another thing that's fun about this game is that the resource management level of this game is very high. You'll be collecting all these resources, and it's really hard to come by lots of these resources. So you need to try your best to manage them and collect as many as you possibly can, because you don't want to do future actions and not have the resources necessary to fully complete or to fully get out of that action what you could potentially get out of it. So there's definitely a lot of heavy resource management going on, and lots of, again, trying to chain your actions so you can get the most resources possible. I also really enjoyed the way that the cards operated. This definitely isn't a deck building game, but it's interesting because throughout the game you are able to, I don't know if I mentioned this in the overview, but you are able to gradually get more cards in your hand. But it's interesting because as you collect cards, you collect a card, but then you actually have to discard a card, because you can never have more than, I think it's 8 cards that are within your deck at any given point. And so it's interesting because at the beginning of the game, everybody has the same starting hand, but you can actually kind of refine your hand a little bit too. Not only are you refining your board, but you're also refining your hand, and you're able to kind of shed your starting kind of lesser good abilities and gradually kind of get this better hand. So I liked that aspect. And again, I loved how when you were playing cards, again, everything comes back to the dice. If you really want to play a particular card, you really need to try your best to be setting yourself up on this rondel to be able to collect the certain dice you need in order to play that card and then activate that ability. So if you are into, medium to heavy Euro games, if you like tracks, you like building out, you're trying to get the most points out of something you possibly could. If you like, a little bit of that resource management going on, that card management, all of that is very much present in this game. So if anything that I mentioned sounds interesting to you, or if you look at this board and you want to know more about this beautiful game, definitely head over to the crowdfunding campaign that is currently going on live. Again, I'll make sure to have everything in the description below, so you just have to hit that link and it'll bring you right over to the crowdfunding page. Again, I want to give a huge shout out to Alley Cat Games for helping sponsor this video today, and also make sure to drop a comment below talking about what kind of stood out to you in this game and what you're looking forward to in this game. Thank you so much for watching this video today. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, it means so much if you could do that for me. Really helps support us in everything that we're doing over here. But until next time, we hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you later.